The first thing I noticed was the new lock. The steel door at the top of Hawthorne Court's west stairwell had always opened with the same brass key I used for my condo. That door led to a rooftop parcel above the 6th floor, a long rectangle bordered by a brick parapet and separated from the building's mechanical equipment by an old metal fence. On a Tuesday morning in May, my key slid halfway into the cylinder and stopped. Then I heard drilling on the other side. Through the wired glass window, I saw 3 men in hard hats moving steel frames across the roof. Orange cable reels sat beside my planter boxes. White paint marked several points on the roof membrane. A survey tripod stood where I usually placed a small wooden table. A laminated notice had been taped to the glass. Authorized personnel only, Northline Wireless Site 6C-114. I knocked. One of the workers opened the door from inside and kept one hand on it, as though he expected me to try forcing my way past him. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I live in 6A. This door leads to my rooftop parcel." He glanced toward the far end of the roof. "We're doing layout for a telecommunications installation." "Who changed the lock?" he called over the site superintendent, a broad-shouldered man named Ray who wore an Apex site development vest. Ray was polite. He showed me a work authorization on his tablet and explained that Northline Wireless had leased part of the roof from the Homeowners Association. The document listed the Hawthorne Court Homeowners Association as landlord. It described the leased premises as part of the building's rooftop. I asked Ray whether they were installing equipment that day. "Not the main equipment," he said. "This is pre-construction layout. Final installation is scheduled to start next week, assuming release." "What release?" "Final site release from Northline." That mattered. They were not yet drilling antenna supports into the roof, but the project had moved far enough for a contractor to change the lock, stage materials, and mark installation points. I asked Ray not to move my planters or make penetrations until the ownership question was reviewed. I did not order the crew off the property. They were following instructions, and nothing would help me less than turning a title dispute into an argument with workers carrying a valid-looking work order. I photographed the new lock, the staging area, the painted markings, and the identification number on Ray's authorization. Before I left, he gave me the number for Northline's site acquisition department. Back inside my condo, I opened the fireproof box where I kept my closing documents. I had bought Unit 6A 12 years earlier. The purchase included 2 parking spaces, a basement storage room, and something called Roof Parcel R8. The parcel existed because Hawthorne Court had been converted from a textile building into condominiums in the late 1990s. The developer had once planned a second penthouse on the west side of the roof. The city rejected that addition, so the developer sold the unused rooftop area with the top floor unit instead. At closing, my attorney had shown me a separate roof diagram. A heavy black boundary line surrounded the west section. A narrow access easement crossed one side of it and led toward the common mechanical equipment. The association could use that route for inspections, emergencies, and maintenance. The association also controlled structural alterations affecting the building. None of that had seemed unusual. I owned the rooftop parcel, but I could not cut holes through the roof or build an extra room without approval. What I did not remember seeing was a provision allowing the HOA to rent the parcel to a wireless carrier for 20 years. I spread the deed and condominium plat across my dining table. The warranty deed conveyed Unit 6A and Roof Parcel R8, as shown on Condominium Plat Book 14, page 61. The markings I had photographed appeared to fall well inside the parcel boundary. I called Dana Cole, the HOA president. Dana had been elected 18 months earlier, after promising to improve the association's finances. She was efficient, controlled, and better prepared than most people who volunteered for board work. Until that morning, we had never had a serious disagreement, she answered on the second ring. "I'm calling about the Northline crew," I said. "They changed the lock to the west roof. That access point had to be secured for the project. It leads to property listed in my deed." Dana took a breath before answering. "The roof is part of the condominium structure. The board reviewed this with council. Did council review Roof Parcel R8? Declaration gives the association control over exterior roof systems. Control over the structure isn't necessarily ownership of the surface." She said the board had negotiated the Northline lease to reduce pressure on the building's reserve fund. Hawthorne Court needed masonry repairs, pump replacements, and a new insurance policy. Without additional income, owners would face a special assessment. The lease promised an initial payment and monthly rent. The exact figures had not been distributed to owners, but Dana said the revenue could cover a meaningful portion of the repair plan. I understood the attraction immediately. The board was not trying to build a private swimming pool or decorate the lobby. It was trying to close a real financial gap. That did not answer the ownership question. I'm asking the board to pause the project until everyone checks the deed and plat, I said. The contractor is only doing preliminary work. They changed my lock. The association controls building access. Then give me a key and suspend work inside the parcel. Dana's voice hardened. Michael, the board cannot let one owner interfere with an approved association project. I'm not asking the board to accept my position. I'm asking it to verify the property at least. She said the property manager would send me the documents supporting the board's authority. 2 hours later, Trent Mercer emailed me on Hawthorne Court letterhead. Trent worked for Sentinel Residential Management, the company that handled the building's records, vendors, and owner communications. His email attached 5 pages from the condominium declaration, a board resolution, and the contractor access authorization. The quoted declaration language classified structural roofs, exterior surfaces, and common mechanical systems as association-controlled elements. The packet did not include the actual Northline lease. It did not include the recorded rooftop plat. It did not mention roof parcel R8. I replied with a scan of my deed and asked the board to identify the instrument granting it commercial leasing rights over the parcel. Trent answered that the association disagreed with my interpretation and that obstructing contractors could expose me to fines and delay costs. An hour later, a formal violation notice arrived. It directed me not to contact workers, alter the lock, or interfere with rooftop access. By the end of the day, I was being warned not to obstruct people entering property described in my own deed. The next morning, I went to the County Register of Deeds. I could have relied on copies from my closing file, but I wanted certified records and the complete chain behind them. A clerk helped me locate the original 1999 instrument that created roof parcel R8. The developer had conveyed it with Unit 6A. We also found later transfers, the recorded condominium plat, and a 2004 restatement of the declaration. The title history looked consistent. Each owner of Unit 6A had received the rooftop parcel. The 2004 restatement was less simple. One section described the building's roofs as common structural elements. A different section preserved parcels and ownership rights previously created by recorded instruments. The restatement did not specifically identify R8. It also did not include a deed transferring R8 back to the association. I left the recorder's office with certified copies and called Elena Park, a real estate attorney recommended by the lawyer who had handled my purchase. I expected Elena to read the deed and tell me the case was obvious. She did not. A deed answers part of the question, she said. We still need to separate title, access, structural control, maintenance rights, and commercial use. She explained that I could own the parcel while remaining subject to broad association restrictions. The HOA might control access through a common stairwell. It might have authority over penetrations into the roof membrane. A recorded utility easement might permit cables or equipment. None of those possibilities automatically gave the board a landlord's right to collect rent. But Elena would not make that conclusion until she reviewed the complete record. She hired Marcus Hale, a title examiner, to trace every instrument affecting the parcel. She also retained Linda Moreno, a surveyor, to locate the recorded boundary on the actual roof. Then, she sent a written notice to the HOA, Sentinel Residential Management, and Northline Wireless. The letter stated that I claimed recorded ownership of the proposed site area and did not consent to construction or commercial occupation. It requested preservation of the lease, title materials, surveys, board records, permit documents, and communications. Elena did not accuse the board of fraud. She did not declare the lease void. She wrote that a documented property rights dispute existed and that permanent work should not proceed until the parties resolved it. Northline responded that afternoon. Aaron Price, a site acquisition specialist, said the company had placed the installation on administrative hold pending final title release. He also clarified how the project had advanced so far. Northline had completed a preliminary review using the condominium declaration, the association's attorney letter, and a site plan supplied by the property manager. That review was enough for engineering, layout, and permit preparation. It was not final title clearance. The initial lease payment had been placed partly in escrow and remained subject to title cure. Permanent construction could not begin until Northline confirmed that the landlord could deliver the promised site rights. The crew on the roof had been authorized to measure, mark, and stage removable materials. Changing the lock had been requested by the property manager, not Northline's title department. The explanation did not solve the problem, but it made the timeline more believable. The project had moved through preliminary stages because the HOA had represented that it controlled the roof. My objection had arrived before Northline released full construction. Dana called an emergency owners meeting for Friday evening. Almost every chair in the community room was occupied. She began with photographs of cracked masonry and water intrusion near the east stairwell. She showed a reserve projection and explained that delaying repairs could increase costs. Then she described the Northline lease. The project would provide new revenue without immediately increasing assessments. The board had negotiated for months, and Northline had already invested in engineering and permitting. Dana called my objection a disputed interpretation of historic documents. She did not accuse me of lying. She said the board's counsel believed Hawthorne Court's declaration gave the association authority over the building roof, including rooftop utility agreements. Several owners looked toward me. One asked whether I intended to make everyone pay more to preserve a private deck. Another said the antennas would not stop me from using the roof. Mrs. Alvarez, a retired teacher who owned a third-floor unit, raised her hand. Did the board review his recorded rooftop deed before signing the lease? Dana said the association had relied on its declaration, its historical control of roof access, and an attorney's opinion. I asked whether the board had provided Northline with my deed. Dana's attorney, seated beside her, answered. He said the board had not believed a separately described rooftop area changed the association's authority over the building structure. His firm was reviewing the new documents. That was more careful than Dana's earlier response. It also confirmed the board had signed the lease without confronting the exact conflict now sitting on the projector table. I did not give a speech. I said I wanted the project paused long enough for a title examiner and surveyor to finish their work. If the association had the rights it claimed, the records would show it. If the records did not, the board needed a different agreement. The meeting ended without a vote. On Monday, Linda inspected the roof. A Sentinel employee accompanied us. She used the recorded plat, building corners and structural reference points to establish where R8 landed physically. The old metal divider fence was not perfectly aligned with the legal boundary. In one section, it sat almost 2 feet inside my parcel. Near the stairwell, it angled back toward the common mechanical area. The proposed Northline footprint was not close to those uncertain edges. The marked antenna supports, equipment cabinets, and most of the cable route sat inside R8. Linda made clear that she was locating the parcel, not deciding who owned it. Marcus handled the title chain. His preliminary report confirmed that the developer had conveyed R8 to the first owner of Unit 6A, and that every later deed carried the parcel forward. He found no deed returning it to the HOA. He found no recorded telecommunications easement. The association did possess important rights. It could cross a defined section of the parcel for emergencies and maintenance. It could regulate structural work affecting the building. It could inspect drains, roof systems, and shared equipment. Those rights limited what I could do. They did not appear to grant exclusive commercial possession to a third-party carrier. Elena sent Marcus's report and Linda's boundary overlay to the HOA and Northline. Northline extended the hold. The next day, Hawthorne Court sent me a notice concerning my planter boxes. The notice stated that personal furnishings had been placed on a common roof without approval and had to be removed within 10 days. The same boxes had been there for years. Elena advised me not to treat the notice as proof of retaliation. Timing alone would not answer the legal question. We responded by asking the board to identify the specific rule, any prior approval records, and the ownership basis for calling the parcel common. I photographed the planters and measured the access lane. None of them blocked emergency entry or common equipment. Then the conflict reached my mortgage. I had started refinancing my condo before the rooftop dispute began. When the lender's title company reviewed the updated documents, It found two incompatible positions. My deed and tax records treated R8 as separately owned property. The HOA's written notices described the same area as a common roof under association control. The title company paused the refinance until the inconsistency was cured or excluded from coverage. It did not decide that I was right. It decided the transaction was too uncertain to insure as presented. My existing loan rate was scheduled to adjust in 6 weeks. Missing the refinance would raise my monthly payment by several $100s. The HOA's title position was no longer only about Northline's lease. It was affecting my ability to refinance my home. Elena notified my existing title insurer, which opened a claim under a reservation of rights. The insurer had not yet accepted coverage, but it began reviewing the recorded documents. The board now faced pressure from two directions. Northline needed title clearance for the lease. My title insurer needed a cure for the ownership conflict. The association responded by producing a document from 2007. It was titled Consent to Roof Use and carried the signature of a prior owner of Unit 6A. The document allowed the HOA to place communications equipment on part of the west roof. Dana's attorney argued that it supported the association's long-standing authority to use the area for telecommunications. For one afternoon, the document worried me more than anything the board had sent before. Marcus obtained the complete recorded file and the meeting records connected to it. The consent was genuine, but its scope was narrow. The prior owner had allowed a small antenna and wireless router used for Hawthorne Court's security cameras and building internet system. The consent was non-exclusive, revocable, and limited to building operations. It prohibited assignment for unrelated commercial use. The old equipment had been removed years earlier. The document did not transfer title or grant a permanent leasing right. Still, it was not meaningless. The board used it to argue that communications equipment on the west roof had always been treated as an association matter. Elena viewed it differently. By asking the prior owner for consent, the HOA had acknowledged that owner permission mattered. Neither interpretation could simply be announced as fact. The document had to be read with the declaration and the title chain. Northline asked for the full consent, the recorded plat, and the actual legal basis for the HOA's authority. At that point, Elena finally obtained the complete lease. Its most important terms had nothing to do with antenna height or monthly rent. The association had promised that it owned or controlled the leased premises, possessed authority to grant exclusive commercial use, could provide uninterrupted access, and had disclosed competing interests. The agreement included a title cure provision. If another party asserted a documented right in the site, Hawthorne Court had to establish its authority, obtain the owner's consent, or modify the installation. That changed the strategy. Until then, I had been focused on proving the rooftop parcel belonged to me. The lease created a different question. Could the HOA deliver the exact rights it had promised Northline? The carrier did not need a philosophical answer about who controlled a condominium roof. It needed an insurable site right, a valid access route, and permission for permanent equipment. If the HOA could not provide those things, the project could not proceed no matter how strongly the board believed it had acted for the community. Elena prepared a focused title packet. It included the certified deed chain, recorded plat, survey overlay, access easements, 2007 consent, title company refinance notice, and my written objection. She sent it to Northline's legal department, its title vendor, the HOA's insurer, and the association's counsel. She also sent the city permit office a narrower question. The city was not asked to decide ownership. Elena asked whether the permit file correctly identified the property interest supporting the owner authorization, and whether the proposed cable route matched the submitted drawings. Northline issued a formal cure notice to Hawthorne Court. The site would remain inactive until the association provided satisfactory evidence of authority or obtained an agreement from me. The city requested clarification because the permit authorization had been signed by Dana on behalf of the property owner. Dana had signed as HOA president, not in her individual capacity. The question was whether the association qualified as the authorized owner for this particular parcel. The permit office did not cancel the project. It placed final approval on hold until the applicant corrected or supported the authorization. A few days later, the board offered me $10,000 for a consent agreement. The proposed contract granted Northline 20 years of rooftop use, continuous emergency access, equipment replacement rights, and several extension options. The HOA would receive the lease income. I would waive any ownership objections. I did not reject it on the spot. I asked for the structural drawings, roof warranty requirements, insurance limits, equipment specifications, and removal obligations. The answers came back incomplete. The installation would include antenna panels, equipment cabinets, and steel frames distributed across several roof points. Cables would run along the parapet and enter a utility shaft. Northline would receive broad emergency access rights. A properly engineered installation might have been safe. That did not mean the proposed payment reflected the loss of control, construction burden, and long-term effect on the parcel. I declined. I suggested moving the main installation to the common mechanical roof and granting a limited cable easement across a narrow strip of R8 if independent review showed it was necessary. That proposal would preserve some revenue for the association and reduce the area in dispute. Northline's engineers evaluated the alternative. The common roof was congested with mechanical equipment, and the new layout would require structural reinforcement and a revised signal study. The redesign was possible, but expensive. Dana rejected the idea before Northline finished estimating it. She believed the board already possessed the authority it needed and saw no reason to surrender most of the lease area. At the next meeting, the association's attorney presented a more developed interpretation of the governing documents. He argued that R8 could be separately titled while remaining subject to broad association powers over exterior roof systems. In his view, those powers included authorizing equipment attached to the structure, provided the installation served a utility purpose, and complied with safety restrictions. Elena disagreed. Northline's equipment would serve the carrier's commercial network, not Hawthorne Court's internal systems. The HOA was not merely approving construction, it was granting exclusive possession and collecting rent. The argument was no longer absurd on one side and obvious on the other. It was a genuine dispute over how several documents fit together. The board now had a practical choice. It could pause, negotiate a limited agreement, or ask a court to clarify the rights before permanent work began. Instead, it voted to continue defending the lease. Dana signed a supplemental authority statement prepared by Association Counsel. The statement did not say no dispute existed. It acknowledged that I claimed a separate interest in R8, but asserted that the declaration gave Hawthorne Court sufficient control to grant the proposed rooftop use. That was less reckless than falsely claiming the objection had disappeared. It was still not enough for Northline. The carrier's title counsel said an attorney's interpretation could not replace the missing site right. Northline needed either a recorded instrument, my consent, or a court ruling. The board's decision also affected insurance. The HOA's carrier agreed to defend the association's interpretation of the documents, but it reserved its position on any losses created by continuing the project after receiving notice of the conflict. That did not mean coverage disappeared. It meant the financial risk was no longer comfortably contained. The situation escalated again when Apex returned to the building. Northline had not released antenna construction, but the property manager authorized limited preparatory work in the west stairwell. The contractor began opening a wall for the proposed cable route. Ray, the same superintendent I had met on the roof, showed me the new authorization. I photographed it and called Elena. Then I called the city number printed on the permit notice. An inspector arrived that afternoon. He did not discuss my deed. He compared the work to the approved construction plan. The drawing showed the cable entering through an existing utility chase. The crew was opening a different wall and did not have the required fire-stopping details for that location. The inspector issued a correction notice and stopped that portion of work. The title dispute had not been decided, but the attempted preparation showed the board still intended to advance the project while Northline's site rights remained unresolved. Elena filed a civil action seeking a declaration of the parties' rights and temporary relief preserving the roof. The complaint asked the court to interpret the deed, declaration, easements, and 2007 consent. It also asked for an order preventing permanent construction while the case was pending. The association denied exceeding its authority. Its response argued that the rooftop parcel was physically integrated into the condominium structure and burdened by association powers broad enough to permit the lease. Northline took no position on final ownership. It suspended the project and stated that construction would not resume until Hawthorne Court delivered a valid site right. At the temporary relief hearing, the judge did not decide the entire case. He reviewed the deed, plat, survey, lease footprint, and competing declaration provisions. Permanent penetrations could be difficult to reverse. The financial harm from a temporary pause was measurable, while physical changes to the roof could complicate the dispute. The court ordered the parties to maintain the status quo. No new Northline installation work could occur within R8. The HOA retained emergency and maintenance access. I could use the parcel but could not make structural alterations while the case was pending. It was not a final judgment. It was enough to stop the project from becoming a permanent fact before the title questions were answered. Discovery began. Marcus completed his examination and found no break in the ownership chain. Every recorded transfer of Unit 6A included R8. The HOA never appeared as title holder after the developer's original conveyance. Linda finalized the physical boundary. The association's declaration remained its strongest evidence. The document gave Hawthorne Court substantial authority over the roof structure, building envelope, and common utilities. The case turned on how far that authority extended. Could the HOA regulate the parcel without owning it? Clearly, yes. Could it require structural review and emergency access? The documents appeared to say yes. Could it grant a private carrier exclusive commercial use and retain the rent without the parcel owner's consent? That was the disputed step. Northline's internal file explained why the issue had been missed. Its title vendor had flagged R8 as a separately described parcel during preliminary review. A site acquisition employee asked Sentinel whether the association controlled it. Trent forwarded the question to Dana and Association Counsel. Counsel responded that the declaration placed all structural roof use under HOA authority. Northline's acquisition team accepted that summary for engineering and lease execution, subject to final title clearance. No one obtained a separate consent from me. The process had not been a secret scheme. It was a chain of assumptions. The board believed control over the roof structure was enough. The property manager repeated that belief. Northline advanced the site conditionally. The contradiction became visible only when the physical layout reached the parcel and I produced the recorded deed. Dana's later choice still mattered. After receiving the title report and survey, she could have treated the conflict as a problem requiring a negotiated cure. Instead, she continued treating the association's interpretation as sufficient. That decision did not prove bad faith. It did create additional costs and weaken the lease. Northline issued a final cure notice. Hawthorne Court had 15 days to provide a recorded right, obtain my consent, or present a court order supporting the lease. The board returned with a larger offer. It proposed $60,000, reimbursement of my legal expenses, and restrictions on routine contractor access. The equipment footprint would be reduced. Northline would accept stronger restoration and insurance provisions. For the first time, the proposal treated my consent as something the project actually needed. I considered it. The amount was significant. The association needed revenue. The installation could be engineered within industry standards, but the term was still 20 years, with extension rights. Emergency access remained broad. Future equipment changes could alter the use. Most of the income would go to the HOA even though the parcel would carry the installation. More important, the relationship required to administer the lease had already broken down. I repeated the alternative I had offered earlier: move the primary equipment to association-controlled space and negotiate only the narrow rights needed across R8. Northline completed its redesign estimate. The alternate site would require reinforcement, a new permit package, and another radio frequency review. The project would no longer fit the company's budget or schedule. Northline terminated the Hawthorne Court lease. The company did not declare the HOA dishonest. It stated that Hawthorne Court had failed to deliver acceptable site rights within the contractual cure period. That was the consequence tied directly to the title problem. The association lost the lease because it could not provide what the agreement required. The termination did not instantly end my lawsuit. The board still maintained that its interpretation of the declaration was correct. My refinance remained on hold. The damaged stairwell wall and roof markings still needed repair, but the reason for rushing had disappeared. No construction deadline remained. No carrier was waiting to install equipment. The association requested mediation. We met 3 months after I first found the changed lock. Dana attended with 2 other board members. the association's attorney, and an insurance representative. Sentinel Residential Management participated through separate counsel. Northline joined only for issues involving lease termination, staged materials, and restoration. The mediator divided the conflict into specific questions. Who held recorded title to R8? What structural, maintenance, and access rights did Hawthorne Court retain? What commercial use rights, if any, had been granted? What repairs were necessary? What document would prevent the same conflict from recurring? Once those questions were separated, the dispute became easier to resolve. The association did not have a deed to the parcel. I did not have unrestricted authority over the building structure. The 2007 consent had been limited and temporary. Northline no longer wanted the site. Everyone had more to lose from another year of litigation than from recording a clear agreement. The settlement recognized my title to roof parcel R8, subject to the association's existing emergency, maintenance, and structural control rights. I acknowledged that Hawthorne Court could inspect common systems, regulate roof penetrations, and enter the parcel when necessary to protect the building. The association acknowledged that those powers did not authorize unrelated commercial leasing without the parcel owner's written consent. A recorded agreement would identify the parcel boundary, the access lane, notice procedures, and emergency exceptions. Northline would release the lease and remove all staged materials. A roofing contractor approved by the membrane manufacturer would inspect and restore the disturbed areas. The planter violation would be withdrawn. The title insurer agreed to issue an endorsement after the clarification was recorded, allowing my refinance to proceed. The financial settlement was not spectacular. Part of Northline's initial payment had remained in escrow and returned directly to the company. Hawthorne Court repaid the portion it had received under a negotiated schedule. The HOA's insurer covered some defense and restoration expenses, subject to the policy terms. The association paid the rest through operating funds and a smaller assessment tied to the building repairs. There was no criminal investigation. No one lost a home. The consequence was narrower. The board lost the exact lease it had tried to preserve, and the association had to cure the title problem before using the rooftop again. Sentinel's management contract came up for renewal later that year. The board selected another company after owners criticized the way access, documentation, and contractor instructions had been handled. Dana completed the settlement process, but did not seek another term as president. Those changes mattered, but they were not the center of my recovery. The center was the roof. Northline's contractor removed the steel frames and cable reels. The stairwell wall was rebuilt with approved fire stopping. A roofing crew cleaned the painted markings, repaired 2 membrane abrasions, and tested the drainage points. The electronic construction lock was removed. A new dual-access lock was installed. My key opened it. The association retained controlled emergency access, and non-emergency contractor entry had to be logged. Linda placed small metal boundary markers along the inside parapet. They were discreet, no larger than a coin. The recorded agreement used the same survey points. My refinance closed 11 days after the title endorsement was issued. On the morning after closing, I carried my planter boxes back across the roof. The plants had survived, though barely. The basil was gone. The rosemary had dried at the edges. I replaced the soil and planted new herbs. Then I set my wooden table where the contractor's largest frame had once been staged. From the street, the rooftop still looked like one continuous surface. That appearance had caused much of the trouble. The HOA controlled the stairwell. It maintained equipment nearby. Its contractors had used the roof for years. The board had looked at those facts and treated them as ownership. Each later step depended on the same assumption: the lease, the permit authorization, the changed lock, the work order. The argument that I was interfering with association property. My deed did not end the dispute the moment I opened the file. The recorder did not decide the case. The surveyor did not decide title. The permit inspector did not interpret the declaration. The judge did not resolve everything at the first hearing. The result came from matching each question with the person or document capable of answering it. The deed showed the recorded parcel. The survey showed where it sat. The declaration defined the association's powers. The lease revealed what Northline actually required. When those pieces were placed together, the board could no longer treat structural control as a substitute for a commercial property right. At the next annual meeting, the association adopted a policy requiring parcel-specific title review before leasing any rooftop, parking area, storage room, or other space that might be separately owned. Future contractor authorizations had to identify the exact legal basis for entry. The rule did not guarantee that another dispute would never happen. It made repeating this one much harder. After the meeting, I went upstairs alone. The new management company had placed a small access log beside the rooftop door. My name appeared on the first line because I had entered that morning to water the plants. I put the brass key into the lock. It turned without resistance. Outside, the planter boxes sat inside the boundary markers. The repaired membrane was clean. No warning sign covered the glass. No cable reel blocked the walkway. The table stood in the same place it had before Northline arrived. I sat down and looked across the mechanical fence toward the rest of Hawthorne Court. The association still owned what it owned. It still controlled the systems it was responsible for. It still had work to do and bills to pay, but it no longer claimed the right to rent my rooftop because it happened to control the door leading to it. At the beginning, that door had opened only from the other side. Now my key worked again, and the title record explained why.